Leukemia had savaged my wife. She signed the company we'd built over to me and left her personal assets to her aging parents. The night she finalized her will, she held me so tightly, her cries a raw mix of love and bitter regret, as if trying to purge a lifetime of disappointment in one last desperate embrace. "I love you," she choked out, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling. "If there's a next life, I swear I'll find you and be your wife again. The company, it's our child now. Let's stay with you. Let be like I never left." It was her only dying wish. As the husband who adored her, how could I refuse? When the doctor handed me the papers, my hand shook as I signed the DNR. That night, under a cold, brilliant moon, she closed her eyes for the last time. I called the funeral home. I had them take her directly to the crematorium, watching as the flames turned her body into a box of cold, gray ash. Next time, I thought, try not to lie to me. When the doctor had approached me with a somber expression to inform me that Khloe Davis's vital signs were gone, my face was a mask. I didn't say a word. I simply pulled out my phone and called the crematorium. As the attendants came to move the body, my expression remained unchanged, betraying no hint of sorrow or relief. I just pressed a thick roll of cash into each of their hands. "Please be quick about it," I said. "Don't make her wait." At the crematorium, I stared down at my wife's still form, my fingers gently tracing the familiar lines of her face. Then I turned to one of the workers, my eyes holding a meaning that couldn't be spoken aloud. "Can we do it now?" The man looked uneasy. He unconsciously touched the pocket where he'd stuffed the money and explained patiently, "Sir, cremations don't start until 6 in the morning. It's only 3. I want my wife to be the first one today. Please, I'll pay more. Name your price." My voice was steel. I pulled out a folder with all the necessary documents, my hands trembling slightly, and held it out to him. The attendant glanced at the papers, then at the genuine, wrenching grief etched on my face. He hesitated for a second before the power of cash made his decision for him. He nodded sharply. "Okay, you wait here. I'll make the calls right now." At 6 a.m., as the first hint of dawn bled into the sky, the crematorium had just opened for business, but the furnace was already roaring. I held the freshly filled urn in my arms, patting it gently. I leaned in and whispered, "See, Khloe? Look how efficient we are. All done in just a few hours." The urn, of course, was silent. For a split second, an indescribable wave of sadness washed over me. I thought of everything I had poured into our relationship over the years, and a bitter sorrow rose in my throat. I tilted my head back, looking up at the sky. A weak sun was fighting its way through the heavy cloud cover, tearing at the gray blanket to cast down a few stray beams of light. "Just like you wanted, Khloe Davis," I murmured, my voice a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. "You're on your own now. You take care." I paused. "And in the next life, try being a good person." When my in-laws, Robert and Susan Davis, heard the news of their daughter Khloe's death, they fell apart. Their wails were dramatic, but their expressions held more performance than pain. When they found out I'd already had her cremated overnight, their act shattered. They went ballistic. Snapping out of their shock, they lunged at me like wild animals, screaming, trying to tear me to pieces. If my bodyguards hadn't been quick on their feet, blocking their path, they would have at least ruined my suit. Seeing that a physical assault wasn't working, Susan furiously pulled out her phone and called 911. Her reason was simple. She suspected I'd murdered their daughter. The immediate cremation, she claimed, was my way of destroying the evidence. A potential homicide is always a high-priority call. The police were there in 30 minutes. After getting a detailed account of the events and carefully examining Khloe's death certificate, the officers' tense expressions softened. They turned to Robert and Susan and explained, with a hint of weariness, that according to the deceased's will and all relevant regulations, everything I had done was perfectly legal. One of the officers suggested that if there were family disputes, it was best to resolve them privately and not waste police resources. After they left, I went into the study and returned with the box containing Khloe's ashes. I held it out to her parents, my voice calm. "Mom, Dad, here are Khloe's ashes. Do you want to take them with you? Or should I have them sent over?" Their eyes went bloodshot. They pointed trembling fingers at me, their lips moving, trying to form curses that wouldn't come out. Seeing their stunned silence, I pulled out a copy of Khloe's will and handed it to Susan. "It's not that I didn't want to give her a proper burial," I explained. "She specified in her will that I was to give all this to you. She said all final arrangements were to be handled by you. You knew that." The reminder seemed to short-circuit something in Susan's brain. She lost control again, screaming as she lunged at me. My assistant and bodyguards dutifully stepped in front of me, holding her back. The will said we would handle it. What right did you have to cremate my daughter without our permission? My baby. My poor, miserable child. Susan shrieked, sobbing hysterically. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and her body started to twitch. Robert rushed to her side, helping her up and guiding her toward the guest room they used on the second floor. The remaining police officer watched them go, sighed, and turned to me. You're all family. Why does it have to be this ugly? Try to see it from their perspective. It's their daughter. What you did, it wasn't fair to them. I let out a short, bitter laugh, but said nothing. Fair? When they worked together to steal my entire fortune, did they ever once think about being fair to me? I found out my wife, Khloe, was lying to me 6 months ago. She came home from a doctor's appointment, her normally radiant face shadowed and grim. She looked completely broken. That night, she locked herself in the study. I stood outside the door for hours, knocking, calling her name, but she never answered. The heavy oak door was a cold, unbreachable wall between us. It wasn't until dawn streaked the sky that she finally emerged and came into the bedroom. Her eyes were exhausted. She said we needed to talk. With trembling hands, she produced the lab report. Late-stage leukemia. The doctor had given her 6 months. Seeing her face so gaunt and ravaged by what I thought was illness felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing my heart. I swore to myself in that moment that I would do anything, spend everything, even go bankrupt to save her life. A world without her would be a world of total darkness. We met in high school. The crush I developed then blossomed in college. I finally worked up the nerve to ask her out, and we became inseparable. We'd been married for 5 years, together for 12. In that time, she had woven herself into the very fabric of my existence. She was as essential to me as breathing. The diagnosis came out of nowhere, shattering our peaceful life. She'd never shown a single symptom, and her previous physicals were all perfect. I couldn't believe it. My first thought was to drop everything, take her to the best specialists in the world, and find a bone marrow match, no matter the cost. Even if it was a long shot, I couldn't live with the regret of not trying. But Khloe flatly refused. She looked at me with a tenderness full of love and resignation. Ethan, she said softly, I know my own body. It's hopeless. Don't waste your energy. Her voice broke. For the time I have left, I just want to be happy. Can you promise me that? Every instinct screamed no, but I couldn't bring myself to fight her on it. From that day on, I dedicated every waking moment to her. My only goal was to make her last days feel warm and full of love. I spent a fortune on gifts, trying to surprise her, telling stupid jokes, just to see her smile. I handed over the day-to-day operations of my company to a general manager so I could be by her side. And it worked. For a while, she seemed genuinely happy. Her face often lit up with a serene smile. But the disease, as I thought of it then, was relentless. It didn't care about my love or my wishes. As the weeks went by, her condition worsened. While I was sinking deeper into a quiet grief, Khloe seemed to have made peace with her fate. She would often rest her head on my chest and whisper, her eyes full of a distant sorrow. Ethan, this day was always going to come. There's no reason to be sad. I've been so happy. At least I had you with me at the end. My only regret is that I have to break my promise. I can't be with you until the end. Back then, her words sent me spiraling into a bottomless despair. I had no idea that in just a few short months, I would discover I was the biggest fool in the world. It was a quiet, sunny afternoon. I was sitting with Khloe, watching her paint in our sunroom. It was her favorite hobby. I never had any interest in art, but now, desperate to share every last moment with her, I was trying my best to appreciate it. Just as I was starting to relax into the peaceful atmosphere, my phone buzzed. The caller ID was unexpected, the IRS. Frowning, I glanced at Khloe, who was lost in her work. I stood up, walked to a corner of the room, and answered. An agent's voice on the other end was grim and professional. Mr. White, there are some serious irregularities with your company's accounts. I suggest you have your people address them immediately to avoid major issues at the end of the fiscal year. My eyes darted back to Khloe. She hadn't noticed a thing. Making a quick excuse about a supplier issue, I left the house without telling her what the call was about. In my mind, she was already dealing with a terminal illness. The last thing she needed was to worry about the company. When I got to the office, my face was like a thundercloud. I fought to keep my voice level as I told my assistant to get the CFO in my office. Now, her name was Sophia Chun. She was 30, sharp and beautiful. 3 years ago, I'd spent a significant amount of money and effort to poach her from a rival firm. I'll admit, her looks caught my attention first, but after working with her, I discovered her professional skills were even more impressive. She was a bona fide prodigy, a brilliant single woman with talent to match her beauty. The moment Sophia walked into my office and saw my expression, she flinched. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes. I cut straight to the chase. The IRS just called me. What the hell is going on with the books? Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing. I didn't rush her. I just sat there, my gaze boring into her. This was the company I had built from the ground up. No one could pull the wool over my eyes in my own house. As expected, she didn't make me wait long. But her reaction was far more extreme than I'd anticipated. Her composure completely shattered. Sophia burst into tears, slumping into the chair opposite me, her voice a choked whisper. Mr. White, I'm so sorry. Please, you have to help me. I raised an eyebrow, my first thought being that she was the one who had cooked the books. But I quickly dismissed it. She was too smart, too meticulous to get caught this easily by a routine audit. That left only one other possibility. A person I refused to believe was capable of it. Steeling myself, I spoke in a cold, low voice. What happened? Tell me everything. In detail. My frigid tone seemed to snap her out of her panic. She took a deep, shaky breath and confessed. It turned out that 6 months ago, just after her diagnosis, Khloe had started quietly transferring massive amounts of company funds. She never said what for. After the first transfer, the company's finances started showing signs of strain. Sophia had privately raised the issue with Khloe several times, but Khloe had forbidden her from telling me and instructed her to create false accounting records to cover the gaps. Since then, Khloe had made several more transfers. The amount she took a few days ago was so enormous that it finally triggered an alert at the IRS, exposing the entire scheme. I was in shock. I knew absolutely nothing about this. I've been by Khloe's side almost constantly for the last few days. I hadn't even seen her go to the office. I don't remember the drive home. When I finally came to my senses, I was staring at a thick file of financial reports I'd grabbed from the office. Every page felt like a block of lead in my hands. I've never been a forgiving man. Once a seed of doubt was planted, I had to see it through. I'd already told my assistant to launch a full investigation, but that wasn't enough. I took a detour and bought a few wireless microcameras. I'm a person who values boundaries. I hate it when people touch my things. I had never once entered Khloe's study without her permission because I respected her need for a private space. Even in a marriage, some doors should remain closed. But now, that study was the only place she could be hiding her secrets. Deep down, I prayed this was all some giant misunderstanding, that Khloe was still the woman I loved, the woman who shared everything with me. But my gut feelings had never been wrong before. The house was empty when I got back. Khloe wasn't there. I checked my phone and saw a text from her, just stepping out for some fresh air. She'd been doing that a lot lately, using the same excuse. Sometimes I went with her, but more often than not, she said she needed to be alone. I didn't reply. I just sat on the couch in the silent living room, staring blankly at the wall, waiting and thinking. By the time Khloe came home, night had fallen. On the dining table sat the elaborate dinner I'd prepared for her, now cold and untouched. As cold as my heart. Ethan, you're still up. I'm sorry I worried you. I shouldn't have stayed out so long. I ran into an old friend, and we just got to talking. I lost track of time. She walked toward me with an apologetic smile, melting into my arms and nuzzling against my chest like a kitten. Her voice was soft, her eyes full of concern, the same gentle, loving woman I'd known for 12 years. But as she drew close, I caught the faint, acrid scent of cigarette smoke on her clothes. Ever since her diagnosis, I hadn't smoked a single cigarette in her presence. I was meticulous about it, even washing my hands and changing my jacket after smoking outside, terrified the smell would upset her. Now that same smell on her was like a dagger in my heart, twisting my gut feeling into a near certainty. The truth is often crueler than you can imagine. It arrived like a knife, gutting the perfect image of Khloe I'd held in my heart and shattering my long-held belief that her parents were humble, kind people. It turned out that for years, Khloe and her family had seen me as nothing more than a cash machine. And now, it seemed, they decided they'd made enough withdrawals. My assistant handed me a thick dossier. Just the weight of it was sickening. To be honest, as my trembling hands opened the file, my heart was already strangely calm. I'd hoped so desperately it was all a lie, some twisted joke Khloe was playing on me. But I knew her too well. It wasn't. Countless photos and video clips mocked me from the pages. Nearly every day around noon, Khloe would walk to the building next to our office to have lunch with a man. I recognized him. Cole Winters, a department manager at a neighboring tech firm. We'd done some business with his company in the past, but not much. Khloe had told me they were childhood neighbors who had recently reconnected. I believed her, assuming their meetings were nothing more than friendly chats. They never did anything that crossed the line in public. "Mr. White, may I come in?" A voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up, surprised to see Sophia Chan standing in the doorway. Confused, I motioned for her to enter. "Sophia, what is it?" I asked. She sat in the chair across from my desk and just looked at me, saying nothing. I wasn't in a hurry. I had my assistant bring in 2 coffees and waited for her to speak. After a long silence, she finally met my eyes. "Mr. White," she said, her voice steady, "I want you to marry me." I nearly spit out my coffee. "Sophia, please don't joke around like that. You may be single, but I'm a married man." A strange, knowing smile touched her lips, making me frown. "Don't be so quick to say no, Mr. White. Watch this video first, then we can talk." She handed me her phone. I took it and pressed play. It was a dashcam recording. The subjects were my wife, Khloe, and Cole Winters. The clip was only 30 seconds long, but it clearly captured them in a passionate kiss. "I'm already aware of this, Sophia," I said calmly. "But my wife doesn't have much time left. I have no intention of retaliating in her final months. I just want to recover the company's losses." Sophia's smile widened, a hint of dark amusement in her eyes. "Mr. White, you've been kept in the dark about everything. Agree to my terms, and I'll show you the real truth." Her words hit me. Was there more? Something my assistant hadn't found? I didn't hesitate for long. I nodded. "Fine. I agree." Satisfied, Sophia expertly swiped to another video. I saw immediately that the first clip had been edited from this longer one. "Honey, are you sure the plan will work?" Khloe's voice, laced with anxiety, came from the phone's speaker. "Of course. Don't you worry." Cole's voice was smug. "My buddy at the hospital has it all covered. Just don't let Ethan take you to any other doctor for a second opinion. The entire medical file will look 100% real." As he spoke, his hand slid around Khloe's waist. She leaned in and gave him a quick kiss. "I know you're good. Is the cremation certificate taken care of, too? How did you even come up with this fake death scheme?" Cole laughed. "But it's brilliant. We'll be living it up overseas before he knows what hit him. Why do something, I do it right," he boasted. "I've got the whole package arranged. With your parents providing cover, it'll be flawless. But you need to make it clear to your family," he warned. "That drug only simulates death for 24 hours. They have to move your body within that window, or Ethan will definitely find out. And you need to speed up the asset transfers. Take out mortgages if you have to. Ethan will be left holding the bag for all the debt." The video then cut to the kiss I had seen before. Watching it, my face turned to stone as a storm raged inside me. The clip was short, but the information it contained was devastating. It was all a lie. Sophia tapped her finger on the desk, pulling me back to reality. "So now do you understand, Mr. White? Your wife isn't sick at all. I've been going over the real books. If their plan succeeds, the $50 million in liquid assets that have already been moved will leave the company with an insurmountable amount of debt." I remained silent. Sophia was right. The video was undeniable, and the numbers on the company's real ledger confirmed everything. Only one question remained. Why? Sophia knew what I was asking. It's simple. If Khloe's plan had worked, it wouldn't just be you, the owner, going down. As the CFO who signed off on the cookbooks, I'd be facing prison time, too. The only way for us to get through this is to tie our fates together. She paused, taking a sip of coffee. "Besides, my family won't stop trying to set me up on blind dates. A man like you, it would be a shame to let you get away." Her proposal was blunt, and I appreciated her honesty. "And why should I agree?" She smiled, then set her cup down. "Because I can help you find all the evidence you need to make sure those debts have nothing to do with us." She leaned forward slightly. "And personally, I don't dislike you. Marrying you would let me skip about 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder. Why wouldn't I take that deal?" I looked at her, my expression serious. "I accept, my dear fiancé." After learning the full extent of Khloe's plan, my emotions went into freefall. I'd expected to be heartbroken, utterly destroyed by the betrayal of the woman I'd loved for 12 years. I had truly, deeply loved her, but to my own surprise, I felt nothing. A profound, chilling emptiness. Perhaps that calm was a defense mechanism, a wall built by the mountain of evidence my assistant had uncovered. Khloe, since you went to such great lengths to plot against me, you can't blame me for being ruthless in return. Let's play this game. Let's see whose years of intimacy gave them the upper hand. You wanted the warmth of a new life? I'll make sure you get the warmth of the incinerator. After all, you're terminally ill, aren't you? 12 years. It was all a lie. I had been too trusting, too lost in a love I thought was real, and I'd missed all the little cracks in her perfect facade. And her family, what a masterful performance. For years, they happily accepted everything I gave them, ate my food, drank my wine, all while conspiring with their daughter to steal everything I had ever worked for. Now I had truly let go. The deep love I once felt for her had turned to ash the moment I learned the truth. You said you had leukemia and didn't have long to live? Fine. I'll do you the favor of sending you straight to the crematorium. I had already installed the cameras in her study. There was still more I needed to know. I watched the live feed as she expertly opened her laptop. The screen displayed an overseas bank account, the balance a string of zeros, so long I had to count them. Then there was the safe. When she opened it, the stacks of cash inside were a physical affront to my eyes. All the jewelry I had ever given her was gone. She must have sold it all, converting it into the numbers on that screen and the bills in that box. Cash is easier to move, after all. Watching all this, my heart turned to ice. I held no more illusions, no more childish hopes that this was all just a sick joke, that she might suddenly appear before me and say, with a light laugh, I was just testing you, darling, to see if your love for me was real. Even if that ridiculously cliché scene were to happen, I would never be foolish enough to believe her again. My face was a blank mask as I stared at the screen. The love I once had for her was now matched only by the intensity of my hate. Khloe, you will pay for your greed and your betrayal. Khloe must have thought her fake death scheme was foolproof. Her face was constantly lit with a sweet, triumphant smile, as if she'd already won. To avoid tipping her off, I matched her performance with my own, wearing the same gentle expression as always, whispering softly to her as she drifted off to sleep. The next morning, as the sky began to lighten, she announced she was going out for some fresh air. Seeing her eagerness, I sneered inwardly, so impatient to run off to Cole Winters. As usual, the housekeeper had prepared an elaborate breakfast. I smiled at Khloe, my voice soft with apology. Khloe, I'm so sorry. Something urgent came up at the company. I have to go in and handle it today. Why don't you just walk around the neighborhood? Let the housekeeper go with you. That way I won't have to worry, okay? She didn't suspect a thing. Her eyes filled with concern as she looked at me. Ethan, is something wrong at the office? Do you need my help? I knew she was just worried her own scheme had been discovered. I shook my head, my tone casual. It's nothing major, just a contract I need to finalize. I'll be back before you know it. Besides, what could go wrong? Sophia Chun is there, and she has everything running smoothly. Hearing that, Khloe visibly relaxed. In her eyes, Sophia was just a fool she had wrapped around her little finger, a workhorse who had no idea what was really going on. Before I left, I couldn't stop myself from turning back to look at her, still leisurely eating her breakfast. A mix of emotions churned inside me. Khloe, I said. She looked up, a questioning look on her face. What is it? I forced the words out, fighting back a wave of bitterness and pain. Is there anything you want to tell me? For a second, the air in the room grew thick and still. This was her last chance. If she confessed everything right now, I wouldn't take things to the absolute extreme. I would divorce her, even give her a settlement. But I was destined for disappointment. Khloe blinked, then her sweet smile returned. Oh, look at me, so focused on my food. I love you, Ethan. I was silent for a moment, my lips trembling as I managed a weak smile in return. I love you too, Khloe. If there's anything you need to say, you should say it. Otherwise, you might regret it when it's too late. She froze, likely thinking I was talking about her illness. Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Ethan, thank you, she whispered. Having you by my side is the luckiest thing that ever happened to me in this life. I smiled and closed the door behind me. In that instant, my heart turned to stone. She had made her choice. I would no longer show any mercy. Everything that happened next, she brought upon herself. Did you hear a word we said? The police officer's impatient voice dragged me back from my thoughts. I looked up at him. He was clearly getting tired of this. Domestic disputes were the last thing they wanted to deal with. We understand you're grieving the loss of your wife, he said, trying a more sympathetic tone. People do things out of character at times like this, but you have to try and see it from her parents' perspective. They just lost their child. The grief they're feeling is unimaginable. You need to stop doing things that provoke them. I frowned, quickly defending myself. Officer, I had no intention of provoking them. I simply called to inform them of their daughter's death. They were the ones who became hysterical, stormed my house, and started this whole mess. I had barely finished my sentence when my mother-in-law's shrill voice cut through the air like a blade. What do you mean, your house? This isn't your house. This is my daughter's house. It's been transferred to her name. Now, get out. Her eyes were filled with a venomous rage, as if she wanted to eat me alive. I was so used to seeing Robert and Susan's meek, friendly facades This sudden transformation was jarring. People really can change on a dime, I thought to myself. I nodded slightly, not wanting to argue. Fine, I'll move out now. As I turned to leave, my bags were already packed and gone. Susan couldn't resist a parting shot. And don't even think about touching a single penny of my daughter's inheritance. Her voice was laced with a vindictive cruelty that I now realized was her true nature. The officer, who had initially seemed sympathetic to the parents, just shook his head. My father-in-law glared at me, his eyes promising murder. He turned to the officer. Officer, I suspect he killed my daughter. He was afraid we'd find evidence. That's why he rushed to have her cremated. He was destroying the proof. The officer shot him a cold look. We have already investigated the matter thoroughly. If you continue to make baseless accusations, you will be facing a slander lawsuit. Robert was speechless. He wouldn't dare tell them the real story. Ignoring their squabbling, I walked back to Khloe's study and retrieved a thick binder of medical records, along with the official death and cremation certificates. My wife was diagnosed with late-stage leukemia 6 months ago. Here is the hospital's report, I said, handing the documents to the officer. You can see here on the initial intake forms that her parents were notified and signed off on the diagnosis. They were aware of her condition. I then turned back to Robert and Susan. Last night, Khloe collapsed at home. Her condition was critical. I rushed her to the hospital. The doctors did everything they could, but they couldn't save her. I only proceeded with the cremation after receiving the official death certificate from the hospital. If you continue this harassment, I added, my voice low and firm, I will be the one calling the police to report you for defamation. The officer took the reports and records, flipping through them carefully, his expression showing no signs of suspicion. After a long and fruitless tirade, Robert and Susan finally gave up. Their faces were masks of resentment, but they sullenly gestured for me to leave. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady and calm. Dan, Khloe's ashes are yours now. The inheritance will be divided according to her will. I spoke as if discussing a mundane chore, my tone devoid of any emotion. Robert's hands trembled as he reached out and took the urn, cradling it in his arms. The moment his fingers touched the cold, hard box, his face crumpled in a mask of genuine grief. Forgetting his anger at me, he hugged the urn tightly as tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks. Susan had already cried herself hoarse. Her body, limp with exhaustion and sorrow, had slumped to the floor, where she remained, unable to get up. Watching the scene unfold, I felt nothing. I turned and walked away. I dragged my weary body back to the new house I'd bought. The moment I stepped through the door, it felt as though all the strength had been drained from my limbs. I barely made it to the bedroom before my legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the bed. The second my body hit the soft mattress, a tidal wave of exhaustion washed over me. I was asleep in seconds, falling into a deep and dreamless void. I remember the bone-deep chill that went through me when I saw the company's real financial statements. For 6 whole months, Khloe had been moving assets like a colony of ants, silently and relentlessly. Even after she started faking her illness, she didn't slow down. She became bolder. The numbers were staggering. The company was on the brink of collapse, its balance sheet bleeding red. The once healthy cash reserves had been completely drained. All that was left was an empty shell. I had to laugh. If she hadn't been so afraid of me finding out, she probably would have mortgaged the company's shares as well, leaving me in absolute ruin. For 12 years, we had faced everything together. I had believed, with every fiber of my being, that she would never betray me. But reality was a cruel master, and it had smashed all my illusions, leaving me in a pit of despair. She hadn't just looted the company. She had liquidated every personal asset in her name. It was all converted to cash and funneled to her parents. Sophia had found the proof. What had I gotten from 5 years of marriage? $50 million in crushing debt. A teetering, hollowed-out company that was now my burden to bear. What hurt most was a chat log I found. A message from Khloe to her parents. Stay away from Ethan. After this is all over. Once things settle down, you should move abroad, too. We need to cut all ties. He's a ruthless man. If he finds out, he'll destroy us all. Reading that, I felt a bitter cocktail of emotions. In her eyes, after all these years, that's all I was. It was true to survive in the business world, to give her the life I thought she wanted. I had been ruthless with my competitors. I was hard on others, and even harder on myself. But with her, and only her, I had been nothing but gentle. I had poured all my love and sincerity into our life together. And in return, I got this. A cold, calculated betrayal. How could I ever let that go? She was right about one thing, though. I would not let them get away with this. I hired the most reputable auditing firm in Chicago. With Sophia Chin's full cooperation, they began a comprehensive review of the company's finances. The move made Khloe nervous. Her anxiety was plain to see. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with a hunted fear. Finally, she cautiously tried to probe for information. "Ethan, is something wrong? Why are there auditors all over the office?" Her voice trembled slightly. I put on a gentle smile and soothed her. "Don't worry. The IRS called a while back. They said there were some irregularities in the books and that I needed to get them sorted out. My hands were tied. If I didn't comply, we'd be in big trouble at the end of the year." I tried to sound casual, as if it were all just routine compliance. Khloe stared at me, her expression a complex mix of suspicion and fear. She was clearly trying to decide if I was telling the truth. I knew she must have realized I was onto something, because from that day on, she became extremely cautious, watching her every move. But I had no time to worry about her paranoia. Thanks to the camera in her study, I now had the password to her offshore account. The net was laid. All I had to do was wait for the prey to walk into it. Khloe grew more agitated with each passing day. I, in turn, played the part of the doting, endlessly patient husband. After 2 weeks, she finally broke. One evening, she put on a performance of a woman on her deathbed, her eyes wide and pleading, her voice a weak whisper. "Ethan, I'm so scared. When I'm gone, what will happen to my parents?" I looked at her, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Yes, there was a time I loved her so much that I would have done anything for her parents. I reached out and stroked her cheek. "Khloe, don't worry," I said softly. "Your parents are my parents. I will take care of them." A flicker of relief crossed her face, but she pressed on. "Ethan, you're still young. You'll meet someone better than me. My parents will just be a burden on you." "I've been thinking," she continued. "I want to give them some of my assets directly. It will be easier for you that way." I gave her a long, hard look, so eager to empty the coffers. "All right," I said. "All of our assets can go to them, but not the company. The company is our child. I'm keeping it." The light in Khloe's eyes burned brighter. This was playing out exactly as she had hoped. I immediately called the company's lawyer and had him draw up the asset transfer agreements on the spot. Khloe, though still a bit suspicious, was too blinded by the prospect of securing the money to think clearly. "Why are there so many pages to sign?" she muttered. "This is such a hassle." I patted her head affectionately. "Khloe, we have to make sure your parents are completely secure. I can't have them facing any difficulties later in life." She smiled at my tender gesture and obediently signed document after document, not bothering to read the fine print. She never noticed that tucked inside the thick stack of transfer agreements were a few other papers, including a petition for divorce. The next morning, I was at the courthouse filing the paperwork. Just a few days before her scheduled death, the mandatory waiting period for the divorce ended. I picked up the final decree. The divorce agreement was simple and direct. I was walking away with nothing but the company, which was now riddled with holes. All other marital property would go to Khloe. When Khloe held the new property deeds in her hands, her eyes suddenly reddened. A complex, unreadable emotion flickered across her face. After a long, silent moment, as if wrestling with some inner demon, she finally spoke. "Ethan," she whispered, "I am sorry." A faint, ironic smile touched my lips. There was nothing to be sorry for. Once a relationship is broken, it can't be fixed. I just hoped she wouldn't come to regret her choices. We left the lawyer's office, still putting on a show of being a loving couple. As soon as we got home, Khloe made an excuse and slipped away to make a phone call. I didn't have to guess who was on the other end. It was undoubtedly her co-conspirator. I didn't care. I calmly took out my own phone and sent a text to my assistant. "Is everything ready?" The reply was instantaneous. "All set, Mr. White. Ready when you are." The truth was, all those assets Khloe had secretly consolidated were marital property. My elaborate plan was simply a way to take back what was rightfully mine. If my methods seemed extreme, well, she was the one who set the example. I imagined her face when she discovered that all the money in that offshore account was about to disappear. I couldn't wait to see it. Good fortune, or so she thought, had put a spring in Khloe's step. Lately, her spirits were high, her face constantly glowing with a poorly concealed smugness. The apparent success of her plan had given her a dangerous sense of confidence. Her trips for fresh air became more frequent, and each time she left, she was practically vibrating with eagerness. I paid her no mind. My focus was split between working with Sophia and the auditors to clean up the company's books and monitoring Khloe's every move. I knew I couldn't let her mortgage the company's shares. The business was on life support, but it wasn't dead yet. If the shares were used as collateral, it would be game over. Perhaps the constant presence of the auditors put too much pressure on her because she never made a move on the company itself. Her actions became more conservative. Finally, the time was right. The next time Khloe went out for her fresh air, I quietly logged into the offshore account. When I saw the breathtaking string of numbers on the screen, I didn't hesitate. I initiated the transfer, moving every last cent. It was company money. It was time for it to come home. I hadn't realized just how greedy she was. There was $100 million in that account. Not only that, I had the contents of her safe emptied as well. There was no reason to hold back now. Looking at the vacant safe later, I couldn't help but smile. She had plotted and schemed, only to set the table for someone else. A week later, the auditing firm delivered its final report. I opened the file, and even though I had prepared myself for the worst, the truth of our financial situation was so dire it almost made me physically sick. It was far worse than I had ever imagined. Clenching my jaw against a surge of white-hot anger, I instructed the company's legal department to get to work. My directive was clear. This was not over. They would pay for what they had done. During this time, Khloe had clearly grown suspicious. After all, her grand plan to transfer all the assets had not gone as smoothly as she'd expected. But what could she do? She didn't have the nerve to confront me about it. Her guilt made her a coward. Khloe no longer had time for secret rendezvous with coal winners. Instead, she started showing up at the office constantly, trying to figure out what was going on. I watched her frantic efforts with a cold, detached amusement, my face a mask of calm indifference. All the pieces were in place. It was time for the final act. That evening, the moment Khloe got home, she rushed straight into her study and slammed the door. A few minutes later, I heard the crash of something being thrown against a wall, the sound of shattering glass echoing in the silent house. I didn't move. I just sat and waited. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the study door was thrown open. Khloe stood in the doorway, her face a ghostly white. Her eyes, burning with a mixture of terror and disbelief, were fixed on me. My own eyes were like chips of ice. I stood up and walked toward her study. Inside, the computer screen was still lit up, displaying the login page of the now empty overseas account. Next to it, the safe stood wide open, its interior mocking her with its emptiness. I walked slowly to the desk and picked up a single, small pill that sat on its surface. "Oh, what's this?" I asked, my voice light with feigned ignorance. Did something happen? A wave of panic washed over Khloe's face. She stammered, her eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. Nothing. It's just a small problem. I can fix it." Her voice trembled, betraying the terror she was trying so desperately to hide. Seeing her squirm, I couldn't help it. I let out a short, sharp laugh. "I thought maybe you'd lost something important." My tone dripped with sarcasm. Khloe froze. Her eyes widened as comprehension dawned, and the fear in them was instantly replaced by a raging fire. I let my smile fade, my expression turning as cold as a winter night. I walked over to a bookshelf and, right in front of her, pulled out the tiny hidden camera. Her face went completely white, her features freezing into a mask of horror. Her eyes were wide, her breathing ragged and heavy. "This has been here for months, you know, and you never noticed?" I said, my lips twisting into a smirk. To her, in that moment, I must have looked like a demon crawled up from hell. "My dear wife, you knew? This was all you." Her voice was a terrified whisper. Her hand instinctively went for her phone. I was faster. I snatched it from her grasp before she could make the call. "Your little scheme wasn't very clever, you know? It relied entirely on me being too worried about your health to notice anything else. Did you really think you could fool me?" I sneered. Her eyes filled with terror, as she collapsed to the floor, sobbing and pleading. "Ethan, I was wrong. I was confused. I'll fix it, I swear. Please, just forgive me this one time, please." I looked down at her, my face an impassive mask, my eyes devoid of pity. I ignored her pleas and began calmly putting the things she'd thrown around back in their proper places. Seeing that her begging was having no effect, Khloe's panic intensified. She saw her chance and tried to scramble for the door while my back was turned. She knew that after what she'd done, I would never let her go. But I was ready for it. The moment she moved, I grabbed her and threw her back onto the floor. I finished methodically gathering the documents I would need for the night, then crouched down in front of her. I held out the pill. "No, I won't take it," she shrieked, her voice high and piercing. It grated on my nerves. "You're too loud," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "Why can't you just quietly accept your fate? This is all your own doing, isn't it?" I pried open her jaw and forced the pill down her throat. Soon, the drug took effect. Her breathing grew shallow, and her body began to convulse. Without any rush, I took out my phone and dialed 911. Not long after we arrived at the hospital, the doctor approached me, his face grim, and told me she was fading fast. He said I should prepare myself. Whenever I remembered Khloe's two-faced act, a cold, mocking smile would cross my lips. She probably never imagined that those few documents she'd carelessly signed would come in so handy. Her plan to have her parents handle her funeral was just a cover, a way to ensure I wouldn't discover her fake death. Scattering the ashes at sea was meant to eliminate any final trace of evidence. But she, the master planner, never realized her entire scheme had been exposed from the start. Khloe's funeral was barely over before her parents served me with a lawsuit. They were shamelessly demanding that I assume the massive debts she had accrued. The loan sharks, who had an uncanny sense for this sort of thing, somehow found out Khloe was dead and had the audacity to show up at the memorial service to cause a scene. Finally, the court date arrived. On the stand, Susan was brazen and defiant. "The debts my daughter incurred during her life are marital debt," she declared. "As her husband, Ethan White is legally obligated to repay them." Her tone was aggressive, her eyes greedy. The judge, looking stern, asked for evidence. Robert smugly produced the loan contracts. There was in black and white, a $50 million loan secured by their marital property. They looked at me, their faces full of triumphant provocation. They had their evidence, but I had mine. I rose calmly. "Your Honor," I said, my voice firm, "Khloe Davis and I were no longer married at the time of her death. According to our divorce agreement, I received the company and assumed all of its corporate debts. All other marital property was transferred to Ms. Davis, and she, in turn, assumed all personal debts associated with those assets." Methodically, I presented the notarized divorce agreement and the official divorce decree. The evidence was irrefutable. The color drained from Robert and Susan's faces. They jumped to their feet, shouting, "That's fake. It has to be fake." Their histrionics did nothing. The judge sternly warned them about their behavior before delivering the verdict. The debts belonged to the estate of Khloe Davis. Her parents, as her sole heirs, were now responsible. Hearing the judgment, Robert and Susan completely fell apart. They knew the assets they had received were worth, at most, $25 million. They had only secured such a large loan because my company had been backing it. Now, the company was no longer theirs, and they were saddled with a debt they could never hope to repay. As they were being escorted from the courtroom, Susan finally lost what was left of her sanity. She collapsed onto the floor, kicking and screaming. "Khloe isn't even dead," she shrieked. "It was you, Ethan. You're a murderer." There it was. The truth, finally. I let out a cold laugh and calmly pulled out my phone. "Hello, 911. I'd like to report a crime. I have reason to suspect my ex-wife's death was not what it seemed." The police arrived quickly and took a hysterical Susan and a stunned Robert into custody. It was time for this farce to finally end. 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. Cole Winters, the man Khloe had loved enough to ruin her life for, and his corrupt doctor friend, finally faced justice. For conspiracy, forgery of official documents, and the illegal purchase and administration of a drug that led to Khloe Davis's death, they were both sentenced to life in prison. When the verdict was read, the arrogant smirks they'd worn throughout the trial vanished, replaced by sheer, abject terror. As for Khloe's parents, they were relentlessly hounded by creditors, their lives reduced to a miserable scramble for survival. The assets they had schemed so hard to acquire were sold off, yet they barely made a dent in the mountain of debt they now owed. They were forced to take menial jobs, working day and night, to pay off a fraction of what they'd lost. The company, once on the verge of bankruptcy from Khloe's plundering, had fully recovered. The $100 million I transferred back from the offshore account had been its salvation. On the day Cole was sentenced, sunlight streamed into my office, painting golden squares on the hardwood floor. Sophia Chun walked in, her stride confident and light. In her hand, she held a box containing a glittering diamond ring. "Fiancé," she said with a sly smile. "I think it's time I got a marriage license." I walked over, lifted her up, and set her down on the edge of my desk. We were so close I could feel the warmth of her breath on my face. "And what kind of wedding gift does my dear fiancé have for me?" I asked, smiling. Her lips curved into a dazzling smile. She leaned in and gave me a soft kiss. "I had someone arrange a warm welcome for Cole and his friend on the inside. I guarantee they won't be walking out of there in one piece." "Is my husband satisfied?" "Satisfied," I said. "Extremely satisfied." That afternoon, we left the courthouse with 2 new, red-bound marriage certificates in our hands.